Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever time of day it is for you to be watching this. Welcome to Candid Conversations with Shawana. I am the host, Shawana Kendrick. And today, for our very first interview, we have Miss Marie Mott. Thank
Hello. Yes, ma'am.
So excited to have you. So excited about this opportunity to really share your story, which is what Candid Conversations is all about. So we'll start with what may be the easiest, but could possibly be the most complex question of them all, and that is, who is Marie Mott?
So first of all, just want to say thank you for inviting me into this conversation. I really appreciate it, and you making space for me. Marie Mott is a 32-year-old middle child of three. So I have both my parents are still with me. My mom, Rebecca Mott, my father, Timothy Mott, and then I have an older brother, Jeremy. I'm the middle, and then a baby sister, Timothy. And I also have two other brothers, Javon and Joe, as well. So I have a pretty large sibling gang, but I am the challenger out of my mother's three children. So I was the most likely to get in trouble, the one that asked 1,000 questions, um, though the child that loved reading, writing, but for the most part, never really spoke up unless it was something I felt was important. If it wasn't anything I felt that was important, you could find me in my room in a corner somewhere with headphones on listening to music. So I never really came out of my shell unless I felt it was generally something that had to do with people and justice. And it's always been that way for me, or people being treated fairly, or being advocated for. That's the time when I step up. But other than that, I'm just this person kind of like in my own little corner. So that's me as a person, just a Chattanooga native, born and raised here with my family, and that's me.
Awesome, awesome. So you mentioned something a moment ago, and the key words were step up.
Hmm.
And Ms. Mott, you have stepped up in a very big way. And I am going to just ask you to tell us about that, what that looks like, especially considering where we are as a community, where we are as a nation, and quite frankly, where we are globally.
Okay. So for the majority of my life, I've been just involved in community. That's nothing new. I was raised with my grandmothers who believed in taking care of the senior citizens on our street. And I grew up in the church, so our church was extremely active. I worshiped literally right around the corner from where I grew up. So I worshiped and served in the same community that my family has been in for several generations. So stepping up is not like a new thing. It's just in between, I would say, being a teenager and doing, graduating from high school, college, and corporate America, trying to get the bag and take care of yourself. I stepped back from doing community work, just trying to live life and be a responsible adult. And I would say the reasons for me missing doing community work had to do with some of the changes I was seeing in Chattanooga, but also seeing Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, and Tamir Rice, and Eric Garner, all of these names that just kept popping up. And then in 2015, we had Javario Eagle that was murdered by the Chattanooga Police Department right here in Chattanooga. So seeing that these issues were happening afar, but also happening at home, I was nervous about, what do I even do about this? What do I say about this? How do I even approach this? And so it wasn't until 2018 when we had Avery Gray's daughter, who was 14 years old, that got dragged out of her mother's car right in front of our courthouse here in Chattanooga. And it was a Sunday. It was a Sunday, and the video went live on Facebook, and somebody tagged me in it. And I saw it, and I was instantly outraged. And so I've been doing like these little small inspirational videos on Facebook, just trying to encourage people. But that was the first time I had ever used a live stream to talk about my feelings about justice when it comes to African Americans in this country. And from there, it has been an absolute roller coaster. I never knew that one video would turn into all of the things that I've been doing since, whether it's getting involved in city council, so understanding how to become civically engaged, being able to collaborate with groups that are doing great work in the community, like the Unity Group, Lincoln Park Neighborhood Association, Concerned Citizens for Justice, and others. And just all of these opportunities really came from one moment in time where I expressed how I was not satisfied with how African Americans were being treated at the hands of police. So just stepping up, and it wasn't that I went out into the world with a cape and did anything. It was just that I spoke about it openly and publicly, and everything's happened kind of after that.
Understood. So you did mention that you began to speak openly and publicly about the things that you were feeling and what you were experiencing and seeing. What is your response to those who say, I agree with her, but I don't agree with her approach?
Okay, so I am a firebrand. Okay, I'm very straightforward. So I'm an Enneagram Type 8, which is a challenger. I don't, and it's crazy because I'm Southern, and Southern people wrap everything in like sugary honey sweetness. My grandmother had that down pat. I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to get. I, pray for me. I'm trying to get there. I'm working on. I thank God for my mentor and my mama. I'm working on trying to soften sometimes how I come across, but I hope people understand that from my heart, my truest intent is not to offend anybody by what I say. It's to tell the truth about, or at least what I feel is my truth about what I see. Sometimes look past the passion and the intensity, because that's actually my greatest opportunity as a challenger, is that I am an intense human being. I intensely love, I intensely care, and so trying to harness that has been a learning curve for me, but I'm going through that process, so be patient with me, that I'm doing the self-development work. But sometimes just look past the intensity or the passion about it and just hear what I'm saying. And if that's true, understand that I'm speaking about it because I care about not only how it impacts me or my family, but I care about how whatever it is I'm speaking about is going to impact others in my community. I'm working on it, but be patient with me, family.
I think we're all working on that, so that's okay. I will ask you this question as well, just to piggyback off of that.
Yes, ma'am.
As vocal as you are and as fiery as you are as a challenger, as you've so eloquently pointed out, have you ever looked back at anything that you said publicly and had any regrets?
Of course. I'd be lying if I didn't. I would say when I made some commentary against my council person, I came across disrespectful, and there's no excuse for it. I needed to find a more creative way to say how I felt without being disrespectful, because I certainly wasn't raised to be disrespectful. So I can definitely say, in the instance where we had a severe falling out and I responded publicly, that I called the councilman out of his name, and I shouldn't have done that. But again, I'd be lying. I wouldn't be an honest or earnest leader if I said that I have never said anything publicly that I needed to retract from. But I will say this: I would rather, and maybe this is crazy, I would rather say it out loud and be held accountable than didn't they ever say it behind your back.
That's fair. That's very fair. That is fair. Okay. Um, so let's talk about where we are today.
Yes, ma'am.
You'll have to remind me, what day are we on in terms of marching? And for those who, I'm sure there's no one who is unfamiliar with, but just in case there is, Chattanooga has joined, or several in Chattanooga has joined the ranks of many other communities across the nation, and again, across the world, to support and protest um, as a result of what we've seen happen repeatedly, unfortunately, to African American men and women.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
tell me where we are in Chattanooga. This is day 14,
13.
13. I was close. Okay.
13.
Day 13. What has this experience been like for you? Because you are on the front lines. Let's be very clear about this.
It has been a learning process, an opportunity. It has been exhilarating. Um, it has been a beautiful experience. I've had an opportunity not only to just be on the front lines and to be one of the main organizers of the uprisings here in Chattanooga, but I've had the opportunity to meet other young people and give them the bullhorn while we're marching so they get to speak their truth and their pain. Because a lot of times we leave the young people out of conversations. We don't give them, especially young Black men and Black women, we don't give them the space to be able to talk about their feelings openly and their sentiments and not censor that. So they might say, bleep 12, and the elders might say, oh my, but that's how they feel, right? And they're not going about this the same way that we marched in the 60s. They listen to trap music. I'm cool with that. Hey, I'm a rock the little baby with them. But they listen to trap music, but they're there. And they've been there. A lot of them have been there since day one and day two, every single day, ready to talk about divestment. This has been an opportunity to show them beyond the protest, because that's not all that we are doing. How do they engage civically? What does divestment mean? What is a city budget? Who is your council person? Who is the mayor? A lot of these things that they never even knew. They never even knew we had a budget and how much was going to each department. So this has been a teaching opportunity and a learning opportunity. I have thoroughly enjoyed this experience. We kind of fumbled in the beginning, but I think we've started to find our footing, and not just going out in the streets and turning up, but also thinking long term about what changes do we want to see. You are a woman of God, Miss Kendrick, and the word says that without a vision and without knowledge, the people shall perish. And so we've been able to give them a vision about how can we dream about Chattanooga being different, that's going to be equitable for everybody, and at the same time introduce them to some knowledge that maybe they didn't have. And might I add, we have been able to do this for almost 2 weeks peacefully. So we have not looted any businesses and we have not burned any businesses to the ground, and we have been intentional about that. So it's been amazing that we've been able to channel some of the raw emotions that a lot of our young people have and they feel, but they've been doing that positively.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So you talked about long-term planning.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
three of the things that you and I have conversed about just recently, and very briefly, were divestment,
Yes, ma'am.
funds, COVID-19,
Mm-hmm.
and then a lack of resources. And I'm going to ask you to touch on each one of those, and what that looks like long term, because we know this is this is a marathon, not a sprint. I
That's
think
right.
we've all accepted the fact that we didn't get here overnight, so it's not going to change overnight. So what does that long-term plan look like?
Yes, ma'am. That's an excellent question. So divestment basically is just taking a portion of the police funds and reallocating that into different areas. Part of the reason why we want to do that is the third portion that you're talking about, a lack of resources. So we have YFD centers, which are youth and family development centers for those that are watching in our communities, but a lot of them are falling apart. They need severe structural updates. And then when you go into these centers, Ms. Kendricks, like there's no books. Where's the computer labs? We have the fastest internet in the world. Why aren't our babies learning how to code at their YFD center? Why aren't they learning about robotics and 3D printing? Some of these resources I found out last year are available at the fourth floor of the library and actually require a minimal investment. So why not put that in every community uh, for children to be able to learn right where they are without having to leave outside of their community? Another part of that is we talked about divesting into transportation. So if you don't have a car in Chattanooga, it's going to be pretty difficult for you to get around. So a lot of people depend on public transit and various other things. And when I look at the budget, what I see is that we invest more in police than pretty much we do anything else. And so when I think about a lack of resources, that ties into our budget priorities. I believe that what we invest in is where our treasure is. And so if we're not investing into our children as our treasure, and things that we need in the community, that's why there's a lack of resources. COVID-19 is exploding in Chattanooga. That's not really just a city thing. That's really more of a state and a county and a federal issue on a lot of instances. So I got to give Mayor Burke a little bit of props. He's tried, and the Office of Multicultural Affairs have tried doing a lot with being usurped by state government and then county government. Uh, and so one of the things that I've been doing as well before the protest was working with individuals about the first thing that we needed to do was make COVID-19 testing free and available to everybody. And that was a push. And then we needed to expand the sites that were available, because there was only initially a few sites available locally. And the more that you start looking at how a lot of these moving pieces in response to community needs happen and why there's a lack, it always has to do with funding. So that's why divestment is the most important thing as far as our expectations with the protest. Without funds, you can't meet the needs of the community.
So let me ask you this question about divestment.
Yes, ma'am.
There are some who are questioning that piece of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And the question becomes, if you take away too much, does that leave parts of the community, especially the Black and Brown community, with fewer resources that are needed?
If you take from the police budget?
Mm-hmm. Because if you think about the community policing model,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's followed or not,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to get into that, that's not, but you think about the police presence that's in the African American community, the Latinx community. If funds are taken away, does that then take away from the security and the safety of the community?
Absolutely not. One of the things that we have to understand is that police are, number one, a reactionary force. So they're not a preventative measure. The second thing is that police really should only have limited responsibility. So police are not supposed to be our social workers. Police are not supposed to be our therapists. police police really have overwhelming responsibilities that don't belong to them. as quiet as it's kept, we have had conversations with the chief of police, and he's for divestment as long as, if we divest from the police department, that we remove some of the responsibilities that are currently on the police to other individuals. If you would just look at Euclid, I think it's Euclid, Ohio, where they took and created a umbrella with up under their police department, but kind of separate. And it was a response team, which sole purpose was to take mental health calls and calls that deal with the homeless. There are a tremendous amount of people who could benefit from services like that here locally. Everybody that calls 911 is not necessarily calling because they need a police officer. Some people need somebody that's a therapist that can de-escalate them, that can talk to them, that can reason with them, that understands the inner workings of whatever they're dealing with. And talking to people who've actually done that work, they have the ability, depending on when they get into a situation, if they feel like an officer is needed, that therapist has the right to request one to respond with them, right? So they're not walking into a situation blindly. So just answering your question, we have to reframe what police are supposed to be in our community for. They're not supposed to be an occupying force. That's not what police is supposed to be for. They're not supposed to be this surveillance type entity. That's not what police are supposed to be for. Police are traditionally, in the sense of American history, at least after the 1800s, are supposed to be peacemakers. So they're supposed to keep the peace, not break the peace. So we just want, what we're asking to invest in is social services, services to be able to help people instead of making them feel like they're always being watched or they're always being trampled upon. Services that open up the space for people not to immediately be incarcerated if they have an interaction with the police and they're trying to, maybe they're having a mental episode and they might be cussing, they might be potentially violent. There are people who go through years of school and training to be able to deal with situations like that. That's not going to end with that person either being harmed or murdered by the police or being in this perpetual cycle of going to jail. So that's the framing that we have. We just want an investment into social services. And really that's going to take a burden off of our police department because they're doing much more beyond their capacity.
Gotcha. Okay. So let me ask you this question, and this is based on something that you spoke about just a moment ago. You gave Mayor Andy Berg props for doing what he's done so far, especially as it relates to COVID-19. What about the state? What about the county? Because it's one thing to make those demands of the city, but
Mhm.
we also have county government, and then we have state, and of course there's the federal level. We could go on and on. So what does that look like?
Specifically concerning COVID or just in general?
Just in general, with the things that you and I've talked about, COVID-19, divestment of funds from one department to other entities within that municipality. What does that look like?
So I have comrades in Memphis and in Nashville. Divestment is a national conversation, so it's not something that's just unique to Chattanooga. So we have folks that are calling for that in Nashville and in Memphis and in Knoxville. So we're right on target with that. We're fighting at every level. We just had a significant win in the education sector with the voucher bill being struck down at the state level. So that came with statewide coalition all the way down to local people were involved in that with the Southern Poverty Law Center. So people are fighting a lot in the state of Tennessee, from city all the way up. So I guess it depends on whatever you're talking about, but people are fighting just from education to health access. There's been a lot of accountability for the governor because I don't know if you saw the outcome of the masks that were given out to the community, which I handed out over 1,000 of those, which had pesticide on them. Mercy. Um, we've been encouraging people to call into the county commission because of COVID response, because of some of the things that are happening with, we have the contract for Core Civic that's coming up again, and they want to renew that for 100 years. There's a lot that people are battling against, but so I want people to know that we're not just fighting at a city level. We are tied into organizations statewide that are fighting on a lot of fronts.
Awesome. Okay. Marie, are you hopeful?
I would have to echo the words of James Baldwin. I'm alive, so I can't be a pessimist. So that must mean I'm an optimist. I am definitely hopeful. Every day above ground is a day to do a little bit of something. And I believe that as long as I got the functions of my extremities, the faculties of my mind, the ability to speak, and I can move, that's a day for me to get something accomplished on behalf of the people, to encourage somebody, to lift somebody up, to try to do the best that I can. All I would have to say is the way to make holding on to hope a lot easier is to just take it one day at a time. Yes, ma'am. I don't think I would do this if I didn't have any hope.
I understand that too. This is a lot of work. I don't think people understand the amount of energy and mental fortitude it takes to continue day in and day out.
Yes.
My last question is, and you've kind of touched on this just a bit during the interview, but what would you share with the young women who are coming behind you? What advice, what words of wisdom would you share with them? So that they can live their life and live the most productive and healthy life possible.
Oh man. Stand firm in who you are as a woman and understand that you are unique, and whatever you have to offer to the world, we need it, because there's nobody like you. Nobody was created to do what you can do, see what you can see, say what you can say, and make the impact you were intended to make. I would say, um, trust yourself. The world will often have you doubt um, that you have a place in it. Take risks. Be bold. In the words of my sister LaQuisha Ewing, do it scared. But above all else, take care of yourself. As women, we are endlessly looking after community, family, church. We're out there getting that bag, and I'm proud of you. Going to school, and I'm super proud of you. We're doing it. We are standing on the shoulders of the women that came before us who didn't have a lot of the opportunities that we have. So take full advantage, no matter if people say, well, a woman has never done that, or you can't do that. Yes, you can. Do it. Do it. And don't look back. Just do it scared, but be yourself. Be yourself.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate you.
you.
You're so welcome. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you'd like to add? I'm going to give you that opportunity to do so.
No, ma'am. I just want to thank you again for inviting me into this conversation. I certainly appreciate you taking time out of your day. As women, often we don't get to have conversation, we don't get to talk, and sometimes when we do, it's not calm. So being able to have a healthy conversation is also appreciated. But I just want to say that I see you and the work that you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, Miss Kendrick. I'm watching you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you. Get some rest because I know there are longer days ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.